Hello everyone, welcome to Sir Rob's Math Lab. Now today we're going to look at how to convert recurring decimals to fractions. So let's look at this question. Here we have convert 0.13, and as you can see the 3 is recurring and we are supposed to convert it to a fraction. So let's go ahead and do that right here. Now for this question we can see, alright, let x be equal to 0.13, and as you can see the 3 is recurring. When we're converting recurring decimals to fractions, we need the decimal point immediately before the first recurring digit and immediately after the last recurring digit. Now in this case, we realize that the 3 is recurring. So we need the decimal point immediately in front of the 3 and immediately after this 3 right here. Now to get the decimal point immediately in front of this 3, we need to multiply this entire equation here by 10. So let's go ahead and do that. So it is 10 times x, which is 10x, and 10 times 0.13, we're going to get 1.3. And as you know, the 3 is recurring, so it goes on and on. Now that we have the decimal point in front of the 3, now we need the decimal point after the 3. So we're going to use this same equation. We always use the original equation. So we're going to use this equation now. So we want decimal point immediately after the 3. So we need to multiply by 100. So let's go ahead and multiply by 100. So it is x times 100. It gives us 100x. And 0.13 times 100. We're going to get 13. And the 3 is recurring. It goes on and on. Good. Now our aim now is to get rid of the recurring part. In this case, the recurring part is going to be the 0.3333, and it goes on. Now to get rid of that now, we're going to subtract these two equations. All right, so let's go ahead and subtract these two equations. So let's go ahead and subtract 10x from 100x. And we know that 10x is the same thing as 1.33. Let's go ahead and subtract. So 10x from 100x, we are left with 90x. And 13.33 subtract 1.33, you realize that the recurring part eliminate the recurring part, so we're left with 12 right here. Now once we're at this stage, we need to solve for x. So let's go ahead and solve for x. In order to solve for x, we are going to divide both sides of the equation by 90. So divide both sides of the equation by 90. 90 cancels the 90, so you're left with x here. So x is equal to 12 over 90. Now this fraction here, it can be simplified. So let's go ahead and simplify it. If we divide both the numerator and the denominator by 6, we're going to get 2 over 15. So this is your answer right here, 2 over 15. So if you convert 0.13 and the 3 is recurring to a fraction, you should get 2 over 15. All right, let's look at this question. So here we have 3.086, and as you can see, the 86 is recurring, and we're asked to convert it to a fraction. All right, so you can pause the video and give this question a go. All right, so let's go through it now. So for this question, we can see let x be equal to 3.086, and as you can see, the 86 is recurring. Now, when we are converting a recurring decimal to a fraction, we need the decimal point immediately before the first recurring digit and immediately after the last recurring digit. Now, in this case, the first recurring digit here would be the 8. So what we want is the decimal point to be immediately in front of the 8. Now, to get that, what we are going to do is to multiply this entire equation here by 10. So let's go ahead and multiply by 10. To multiply by 10, we're going to have 10x is equal to 30 0.86. And as you know, the 86 is reoccurring, so it goes on and on. Good. So now that we have the decimal point immediately in front of the 8, we now need decimal point immediately after the last recurring digit. In this case, it is 6. Now to get the decimal point immediately after the 6 now, we need to multiply this same equation here, that's the original equation, by 1,000. So let's go ahead and do that. So 1,000x is equal to 3,086.86, and you know the 86 is recurring. All right, let's go. So now we need to get rid of the recurring part, which would be the 8686. Now to get rid of that, we need to subtract these two equations. All right, so let's go ahead and subtract these two equations. So you're going to subtract 10x from 1,000x minus 10x, and we know that 10x is the same thing as 30.8686, and as you know, it is recurring. Now 1,000x minus 10x, you're left with 990x. And let's look at this here. You realize that the recurring part will eliminate the recurring part. So we're left with 3,086 minus 30, which gives us 3,056. Now, once we're at this part here, we need to solve for x. Now, to solve for x, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by the coefficient of x, which is 990. Good. So 990 cancels the 990, so you're left with x here. So 3,056 divided by 990. If you look at this here, this can be simplified. Let's go ahead and simplify it. We can use, let's say, 2. So if we divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2, we should get 1528 over 495. All right, so that would be it. So that would be your answer right here. So when you convert 3.086, where you have the 86 reoccurring, it is the same thing as 1528 over 495 as a fraction. Here we have the final question that we want to look at in this video. So we have 0.5401, the 401 is recurring, and we're asked to convert this recurring decimal to a fraction. Feel free to pause the video and give this question a try. For this question, we're going to say let x be equal to 0.5401, and as you know, the 401 is recurring. Now remember, once we are converting a recurring decimal to a fraction, we need the decimal point to be immediately before the first recurring digit and immediately after the last recurring digit. Now in this case, the first recurring digit is 4, so we need a decimal point immediately in front of the 4, which would be right here. Now to get that, we need to multiply this entire equation here by 10. So let's go ahead and do that. 10x is equal to 5.401. And as you know, the 401 is reoccurring. Good. So now that we have the decimal point in front of the first reoccurring digit, we need the decimal point immediately after the last recurring digit, which in this case would be the 1. So we need the decimal point to be after the 1 right here. Now to get that, we're going to take the same equation, the original equation, and we're going to times it by 10,000. So let's go ahead and do that. So 10,000 x is equal to 5401. And as you know, the 401 is recurring. Good. So now we need to get rid of the recurring part. In this case, it is a 401, 401. So to get rid of that, we're going to subtract these two equations. So we're going to subtract 10x from 10,000x. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to subtract 10x. And we know that 10x is the same thing as 5.401, 401, and it continues. So let's go ahead and subtract them. Now, if we subtract 10x from 10,000x, we're left with 9,990x. So 9,990x. And if we look here, we realize that the recurring part eliminates the recurring part. So you're left with 5,401 subtract 5, and that's going to give us 5,396. So there we have it. Now, once you're at this stage, we simply need to solve for x. Now, to solve for x, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 9,990. All right, so 9,000 cancels that. So we're left with x, which is equal to 5,396 over 9,990. Now, for this fraction, yes, it can be simplified. So let's go ahead and simplify it. So x is equal, we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. So if you divide 5,396 by 2, you're going to get 2,698. And if you divide 9,990 by 2, you're going to get 4,995. All right, so 4,995. So this is your answer right here. So 0.401 is the same thing as 2,698 over 4,995. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you subscribe.